خلقي كلهم كلهم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم
Every dream that I dream, and every time my heart beats, every teardrop that runs down these tear-stricken cheeks, I want it all to be for the sake of unity. I want my tears to be flowing while my heart is brightly glowing. I pray that these claims of love will one day be true. 'Cause just as you love me, I want to love you too, Ya Rasulullah. Ya Nabi Ya Rahma, Ya Rasulullah.
أشرف العرب والعجم محمد خير من يمشي على قدم محمد باسط المعروف جامعه محمد صاحب الإحسان والكرم محمد أشرف العرب والعجم محمد خير من يمشي على قدم محمد باسط المعروف جامعه محمد صاحب الإحسان والكرم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق
I can't hold back the tears from my eyes when I think about the blessed life of the blessed man. Me said them and him did a strive. They take them out to the darkness and into the light. For real, the prophet was the perfect blend. The seal of the prophet, so the circuit end. I bear witness that Allah did provide the best and the blessed of all of the guys.
La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la
I dream of Jannah and my Jannah's loving you. I dream of Jannah and my Jannah's loving you, Ya Rasulullah.
ilaha illallah.
Please let me love you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I see other people are taking their time to join, and that's totally fine. So we're gonna start with our agenda. It's already 7:10 p.m. So we are so excited to have you all here. It's our last and final Sisterhood at Home. As much as we are so excited for our speaker, we also so sad that this is gonna be the last one until we start the second series of Sisterhood at Home. So my name is Zainab Abdi. I'm the Leadership Development Coordinator. I am so excited to be part of an amazing team of RISE. We have our team members joining us as well. And I'm gonna send it to Mashina to introduce herself and also talk about what's this program. And then I will open the event with the Quran.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. So glad you are able to join us tonight. As Zainab mentioned, Sisterhood at Home actually started right around when the pandemic began and we had to shelter at home. And so we had asked our sisters, what did they need during this time? And they told us that it was space to be able to process and heal and be able to address some of the mental health challenges that they were facing. And so we have had almost, I think, 11 sessions since the pandemic started. And we always ask our sisters who are located here in Minnesota to come in and provide tips and tricks and information about how to handle those challenges. So really excited that Sister Run is here tonight. It is sad because it could be potentially our last one for 2022, but we're excited for what's to come for the rest of the year. So thank you all for joining tonight, and I'll pass it back to Zainab.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker. So we have Sister Roon Saeed. She is a lesson therapist, a speaker with several years of experience working with individuals, families, and groups. She has received training in different modalities of therapists and used them electrically to best fit the client's needs. She also incorporated a mind-body approach in her work due to the strong connections between our emotion state and the physical well-being. So we are very excited to have Sister Roon here to talk to us about how can we connect with our own spiritual and true healing. So Sister Roon, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I always have a hard time listening to my bio because I'm like, I don't want the attention on me, but here we are. I was so excited to talk with you all tonight and to share space with you all. I'm going to share my screen. And can you all see my screen? Yes, okay, great. So tonight, inshallah, the topic is reclaiming resilience. So we're going to talk about different ways to sort of strengthen and foster our emotional well-being, which is connected to resilience. As I share this, I am cognizant of the world that we live in, and at times it does feel a little difficult to talk about emotional well-being and self-care and just doing these things for yourself while also understanding the nature of how the world is. The pandemic has been going on for several years now. People are very burnt out. Capitalism is expecting us to show up and produce at a similar capacity that we were pre-pandemic, which is very difficult and at times impossible for people to do. So I am aware that that is the current state of our world and just how the news is going right now, and that our environment and our systems that we interact with do influence our emotional well-being. So I wanted to say that caveat So as you're listening to my presentation today, please take from it what sounds good to you, what feels good to you, what feels doable to you. If something feels like it's really difficult for you to implement, that's totally fine. If it's more about sharing space with us tonight and just taking in the information, that's great too. There's no pressure to sort of implement everything that you're listening to. Do what you're able and do what feels good to you. So with that, our agenda tonight, inshallah, we're going to talk about stress and burnout. And then we're going to also talk about resilience, emotional well-being, talk about self-care, and then inshallah, I will leave you guys with some takeaways from the workshop. If at any time you have any questions, if you want to like share a point that is like resonating with you, please feel free to do so. I lecture in class every day, so it's nice to have a little bit of back and forth. So if you want to, feel free to chime in. And if not, that's totally fine. I'll just go into lecture mode. That's okay too. So the first thing we're going to talk about is stress. So what is stress? We hear about it a lot. Stress is defined as when the demands of the situation threaten to exceed the resources of the individual. So what's going on in that moment is exceeding the capabilities and the resources of that individual. So some different types of stress. There's routine stress. So stress that can come from school, that can come from your job. Just maybe the day isn't going the way that you wanted it to. And then there's traumatic stress. So something that's unexpected that occurs that brings stress into your life. Some of the symptoms of stress, there's insomnia, so difficulty sleeping. The person might find themselves being more angry, more irritable, maybe feeling more sad. And then there's some physical symptoms of having like headaches, stress headaches, or tension headaches, and then upset stomach. So this shows you that stress can impact you emotionally with anger, sadness, feeling more anxious, and then it can also impact you physically with an upset stomach or a headache. So the next thing is burnout. So what is burnout? Burnout actually stems from stress. And burnout is what results after you've been dealing with long-term, unresolved, and unmanaged stress. So stress leads to burnout. And some of the symptoms of burnout is essentially just the symptoms of stress exacerbated. So exhaustion, lack of energy, you're not really motivated. There's that sense of self-doubt. Is what I'm doing working? Nothing seems to be getting better. Feeling more negative, and just getting sick more often. And a lot of the times, we don't realize that we're stressed until we've reached the point of burnout. And I know that happens to me quite frequently. I'm doing better at it now, but I remember getting to that point of burnout and getting sick, and my body sort of forcing me to slow down because I was not cognizant of the stress, which led to burnout, which led to my body just getting sick, and then it resulting in me having to take the time off to rest and recuperate. And then now we're sort of hitting this pandemic wall. And what this means is that the symptoms that we were feeling from sort of the stress and the burnout, the pandemic burnout, and now we're sort of hitting this wall, and it's just the exacerbated like anxiety and grief, fatigue, and just overall exhaustion that we've been feeling because of the pandemic, because of having to continue to work. The news, and the news is coming in more frequently, and it's not great news that's coming in. For parents, they're changing childcare, having to do school at home, losing out on daycare, being isolated from loved ones, from community, and just the overall stress, like not really getting a break from anything, results in that, again, low motivation, low mood, low frustration tolerance. You might find that you're getting upset more easily, and you're not sure why. This could be a result of it. You're exhausted, probably because you're having sleep issues. There's that mental fog, not being able to think clearly. and just overall decreased productivity. Sometimes you might find yourself just questioning like, what it's getting more difficult to show up at work or at school or whatever role that I have and put on this face when I'm exhausted, when I'm just feeling so burnt out. So all of those symptoms just have been amplified by the pandemic, by racial injustice, financial instability. A lot of people are losing their jobs, political unrest. So a lot of factors are playing into why we're feeling the way that we feel. So there is a valid reason that you feel the way that you do. So with all of that, we'll verge into talking about how to manage it. How do you manage stress and burnout? Especially when there's not really much of a break, right? So the first thing that's important is awareness is key. When I was talking about my example earlier, and I was saying how I didn't used to realize when I would get to this stage of burnout until I got sick, I wasn't aware. And in order to make a change, you've got to be aware. So being aware, taking time to check in with yourself, see how you're feeling, see how you're doing. A lot of the times we're in autopilot and it's really hard for us. We're just going. And that's what I was doing, just going until like I hit that wall and my body was like, okay, we're not going anymore. So make sure that you take the time to check in with yourself. Another way is to schedule breaks and take time off. Schedule breaks in a way that makes sense to you, whether it's like scheduling like a 30-minute break to just take a moment to like pause or to breathe. So schedule breaks or take breaks in a way that feels good and makes sense to you. Taking time off from work, from school, prioritizing your well-being. Another way is boundaries, knowing your limits, knowing when to say no. Sometimes our stress comes from our inability or difficulty that we have in saying no. We're adding on to the stress in our lives because we're showing up for people when we are not able to, because we have difficulty saying no, because we worry about what other people will say if we don't show up for them. So it's important to have those boundaries and know your limits. And we'll talk about boundaries later on in this presentation, about how to identify, how to have boundaries. We'll talk about that later on. Another way to manage stress and burnout is to remember, think, feel, behave. The way that we think, so the thoughts that we have influence the way that we feel, which later on influences how we behave. So if you're thinking a certain way, it's inevitably going to impact the way that you feel. So it's going to impact your emotions, which will then impact the way that you behave. So it's important to check in with your thoughts, see how you're thinking, see what you're thinking, and then just see how that ends up influencing how you feel. So if you're thinking more optimistically, if you're having hope, if you're having faith, it will change how you feel. So if you're feeling more anxious earlier, having that hope and having that faith will help decrease that anxiety that you were feeling, which will then impact the way that you behave in that certain situation. And then finally, mindset. So it's important to check in on your mindset. How are you thinking? Are you having a positive mindset? Are you having a realistic mindset? And try focusing on the small things that are enjoyable to you and that you appreciate. This is sort of that cultivating gratitude or an attitude of gratitude. That can improve your mood and your emotions by focusing on the things that are going well, focusing on things that you enjoy, and identifying the things that you appreciate. Just want to check in. Any questions so far? Okay, I will continue onward. So coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms are the ways in which people cope with the situation. In the therapy world, we say maladaptive, which is, or you might hear like unhealthy. And I don't really like to use unhealthy or healthy, but so like maladaptive are ways that you cope in a situation and they might help you, but they're not really good for you. And then adaptive coping mechanisms are ways that you cope that are better or healthier, as they might say. So maladaptive is that you might isolate yourself from people. Something's going on and you're coping with it by isolating yourself. Maybe you're avoiding. So an example of that would be maybe you have a task that you need to complete, and you don't really want to do it. It's not a very fun task. And then all of a sudden you get so tired and you're like, I think I want to take a nap. That could be an avoidance mechanism. You're avoiding the task at hand because it's bringing you stress. Rumination. So rumination is just constantly like thinking and replaying, and just like working it over and over in your mind. So you're coping with it by ruminating on it. It's not really good for you. But in that moment, that's how you're coping with the situation, by rethinking about what happened, what was said, replaying the scenario in an attempt to cope with it. Another maladaptive coping mechanism is denial. So denying that there's even an issue, there's nothing going on, everything is fine, even though there's something that is going on. You're coping by just denying its existence. And then numbing. So just numbing yourself from the situation, numbing yourself from feeling what it is that you need to feel is the way that you're coping. You're not letting yourself cry. You're not letting yourself grieve. You're not letting yourself be angry. You're just sort of numbing yourself. And then adaptive. So adaptive, again, is that healthier way of coping. And then that's through acceptance. So acceptance of what is going on. You may not agree with what's going on, but by accepting it, you're able to sort of take it as it is versus what you want it to be, which can cause you more distress. So practicing that acceptance, actively coping with it, you're not avoiding it, you're facing it head on. Allowing yourself to feel and process your emotions. So you're not numbing yourself out, you're allowing yourself to feel what you need to feel. And then cognitive restructuring, that again, this goes back to your thoughts. So looking at how you think, and then seeing if that thought pattern is helpful to you. And if it's not, try thinking in a different manner. Try restructuring your thoughts in a way that is more helpful to you. And then finally, seeking support. So seeking support from people that you trust, people that are helpful to you, and knowing that you don't necessarily have to face it alone. So these are just some of the ways that people tend to cope with different situations. So earlier I talked about boundaries. And it's important to have boundaries. And sometimes it can be difficult to have boundaries. But what boundaries are, they help you communicate your limits and needs to others. And the signs that you may lack boundaries: you don't like letting people down, you don't speak up for yourself, you have difficulty saying no, you may feel taken advantage of, and you make decisions based on what other people need. So someone asks you something, you don't check in with yourself and see if it's something that you're able to do. You see how it would make the other person feel, or you would see how it would be helpful to the other person. And it's totally fine to want to help people, but you don't want to do it at the expense of your own well-being. So the benefits of having boundaries are that you feel more empowered, you feel more appreciated, your relationships are healthier and more supportive, and you have increased self-worth and self-esteem. So how to set boundaries. So first of all, again, we're going back to that awareness piece. You have to identify what is the boundary that you're trying to set? What is the boundary that you need? So take some time to identify, what boundary do you need in this moment? What do you need to feel safe? And what do you need to feel less overwhelmed? So once you identify what that boundary is, then you communicate it to the other person. This is what I need. This is what I'm able to do. And it's important to just be clear and concise in the words that you say. And sometimes you might need some time to like write it out, to think it through, to practice. That way you're able to sort of have clarity in what you're trying to get across. Remaining calm. Sometimes people won't take too kindly to your to the boundaries that you're trying to set. They may not have the access that they used to have with you. So just remaining calm, and not feeling pressured to justify. You've already gave your reasons. You've already identified what the boundary is that you need. You don't have to justify why it's important for you to have this boundary. And then follow through. It's important when you set a boundary to actually follow through on the boundary, because otherwise there's not really a consequence to it. It's, you're saying this is what I need. The person has crossed that boundary. They're not adhering to it, and then nothing happens. So making sure that you follow through, understanding that there might be resistance to you having this boundary. Again, the person is not going to have the access that they used to have with you. You are not going to show up in the same way that you did before. So there might be a little bit of resistance. There might be some upset feelings, but it's important to remember the reason why you decided to set this boundary. And then think about what will happen if someone crosses your boundary. Are you going to reiterate that boundary? Are you going to have like certain consequences? Like, I'm not going to be available to you if you can't respect what I need in this moment. And remembering to just be firm and consistent. There may be a back and forth. There may be a need to, again, communicate that boundary. But consistency is key here.
Excuse me, Ron, I have a question I would like to ask about boundaries.
Yes.
I feel that it is challenging for me, for example, to put boundaries to my closest family members, such as my mom and my dad specifically. And I'm currently struggling with it. Actually, it's been a very difficult week. And I wanted to ask you, how can I keep my boundary firm and consistent without losing them? Because I feel that they feel that I'm pushing them away. That's kind of like the feeling I get through the process of putting the boundaries.
Okay, and that makes sense. So them feeling like because you have this boundary, they feel that they can't get as close to you as maybe they were before.
Exactly. I feel that it's also a very cultural thing. I am Latina, so we don't leave our parents' house unless we are getting married, unless we're going to study overseas. But I did. I just left and I live in the same city, but in my own apartment, and I do all of my stuff by myself. I feel that understanding of parenthood is being different for them than what they expected or what they lived. And it's like on us, the new generation, to change that. But at the same time, I feel like they think I am too sensitive. They think I am making a big deal about something that's not that important. And I sometimes feel like I just go back on steps just so that I can keep like having a good relationship, because it's not anyways. But just so that I can keep having them in my life, I feel.
That makes sense. And I think you're at that sort of like resistance, like where like there's resistance to the change, even though you've made the change, they're not fully on board with it. So I think in that case, it might be important to see, like, I'm assuming this is something that like you don't want to go back on. You enjoy having your own space. But it sounds like they want opportunities to sort of connect with you and be close. So finding ways to be able to do that without changing your boundary of having your own space. So is it like going to visit them, or is it like going out with them, finding ways to meet that need of like connecting without giving up on your boundary? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And I understand, I come from a similar culture too. And you're making a big shift. So kudos to you. I'm glad you're doing what you need to do. At the same time, I know there's probably some difficulties as you make that. So I'm glad you were able to identify a boundary, and I hope that you're able to sort of meet both of your needs in a way that feels good to both of you without having them cross your boundary or having you go back on your boundary. And then, so we talked about boundaries, how to set them, and just going back on boundaries. So having boundaries is a good way to support your emotional well-being, because you're sort of allowing people, you're showing up for people in a way that feels good to you, and you're sort of providing limits on what you're going to take, what you're going to put up with, in a sense. So having boundaries supports your emotional well-being. And these are some of the things that I want you to think about as I'm going through these topics, are how can these support your emotional well-being, because that leads to being more resilient when we're taking care of ourselves in that way. So something else that's important to do is just slowing down, remembering that the society that we live in has this sort of hustle culture. We're expected to just be on the go, to produce things, to work. And it's very chaotic. It's very stressful. It's not good for our well-being, because it can impact your immune system. As I was telling you, if you're stressed, if you're becoming burnout, you're liable to get more sick. It can impact your physical and emotional well-being. At the same time, it also takes you away from being present in your life, because you're always on the go, because you're always thinking about the next thing. You're not really enjoying where you are right now. You're not really taking the time to be present in your life. Some of the things that I bring up with clients sometimes is when we're sort of on this autopilot and thinking about like some of the times that you drive and you realize you've gotten to your destination, but you don't really remember all of the drive, and just thinking like majority of the people are driving that way on the road. It's a little bit scary, but we're not mindful. We're just sort of thinking about the things that we need to do next. We have this running to-do list in our minds. That takes us away from being present in our lives. And then what ends up happening is we sort of miss out on our life because we're so future oriented. We're living in the future. Some of us are still in the past, sort of replaying, rethinking about things that already happened. But it's so important to know that this is the time that we have right now. Right now, the present, this is what we have. And if you really think about it, all the future things that we're thinking about, some of those things have happened, and have we enjoyed it as much as we thought we would? Because were we in the moment, or were we thinking about the next big thing that we're trying to achieve? So it's important to focus and live in the now, take time to be mindful, take time to be more present. If you find yourself worried or focused about things that are in the future, remind yourself that they haven't happened yet. But the present is happening right now, and you're able to be in it and you're able to enjoy it. A lot of our stress comes because we're not focused in on where we are right now, but focused in or worried about what's to come. So taking the time to sort of check in with yourself and just shift your thinking to be more mindful of the present. As you think about your life, as you think about like your to-do list, identify what's important, what's necessary, and removing what's not. Sometimes we do things that are not really necessary, that are not really helpful, but we do it because we think we're supposed to. So just thinking to yourself, what do you identify as important? Like you yourself, what's important to you? Not what society tells you is important, but what is important to you, to you as a person, to your well-being. And then think about what makes it on your to-do list, and does it align with what you identify as important? So just some small ways to sort of slow down, cultivating an attitude of gratitude. When we practice gratitude, we're able to enjoy what we have right now. Taking time to add moments of calm, it's especially important before you go to bed to have these moments of calm. Because that helps with the quality of sleep that you get, but also other areas throughout your day. Where can you find moments to just add some calm? And then taking time to pause, taking time to breathe, and just taking time to be is really important. If you think about the day that you've had today, were there moments of calm? Were there moments that you were able to just sort of pause and breathe? A good way that I try to incorporate it is in the morning before when I wake up, I don't look at my phone right away. I just take some moments to like read my dhikr, to read some Quran before I decide to engage back with the world. Prior to doing that, I would pick up my phone. There's like already a list of emails that I need to get to. There's so many notifications. I'm already stressed and my day just started. But by shifting that and then taking some time to just read Quran, do my dhikr, I found that I'm in a much better mind space when I am attending to those tasks. Another great place to add moments of calm is after prayer. Just sitting there and just taking some time to breathe. That's a great way to add it. You're already doing the prayer, so it's something that's already on your schedule. So it's a great way to just to attach it on. So resilience, a quick definition of resilience, if you Google it, is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And it's important to note that being resilient is not about being invincible. It's not about thinking that, oh, I'm resilient, so nothing is going to impact me. It's not going to affect me. It's more about being resilient is you're able to accept and adapt to what is going on. You're not fighting against reality. You're not thinking about like what should have happened or what could have happened, because that causes you emotional distress, because what should have happened and what could have happened isn't really happening. So by being resilient, you're able to accept and adapt to what is going on in that moment. Again, mindfulness. And then you're focusing on what actually is happening. So again, not focusing on what you want to happen, because that is not the current reality. Because if it was, then we wouldn't be so upset because what we wanted to happen happened. But it's more about moving through, so accepting what is happening and moving through what is happening, the reality of the situation. So some ways that you can be more resilient is to identify your strengths. So we all have strengths, but sometimes it's hard for us to see that. So taking the time to identify the things that you're good at, the positives, what skills do you have? And then see how you can take your own strengths and utilize them towards the improvements that you want to make, or in utilizing them to adapt to the current situation that is at hand. So don't focus on like what you're doing wrong or what you're doing bad. Don't focus on how you're reacting to the situation. Don't label it. Just see what is going on, accept the reality of the situation. And then once you've identified your strengths, how can this help you cope with what is going on? So identifying and then working on strengthening your own strengths. And then you can do that by practicing those strengths. So it's important to identify what you have and then see how you can utilize it to cope with the current situation. And then your strengths get stronger by practicing it. You got to practice it. Another way to be more resilient is practicing self-compassion. So acceptance, again, of the reality of the situation, what is going on, while also being gentle with yourself. So being kind, being compassionate to yourself, not saying that you're reacting in a certain way, not being critical of yourself, but being more gentle is the aim. Because if we're responding to ourselves with shame and judgment, we're not going to move forward. We're just going to feel worse. So being more self-compassionate, engaging in some positive self-talk will be much more effective as you are dealing with the situation, as you're healing, than shame and judgment. Being critical to yourself is not going to get you to where you want to go. And then another way to be more resilient is doing something outside of your comfort zone. When you do something outside of your comfort zone, it increases your confidence. And then that is another strength to have. So taking the time to do something that sort of scares you, and then again, practicing to get better at it. Finally, reach out for support. Being resilient does not mean that you have to go at it alone. You can reach out for support, you can ask for help, and see how other people can sort of help you in that moment. So another way, again, to overall support your emotional well-being is showing up for yourself. And this can connect to the boundary talk, this can connect to resilience, but it's really important to show up for yourself. And what does that mean? It means that you're making choices in your day-to-day that are best serving you. Because you're self-aware, because you're mindful. Remember, we're practicing mindfulness now, we're being in the moment. So you're able to identify what choices you're making and how they're best serving you. You're listening to your heart, you're listening to your mind, you're listening to your body, you're listening to what you need as a whole person. And then you're tending to that, you're showing up for yourself in that way. I think a lot of us are great at showing up for other people and supporting them, but not so great when it comes to showing up for ourselves. So it's important that you take the time to check in. Again, that awareness piece, all of this has connections, to see look at the choices that you're making now. How does that best serve you? Does it feel good to you? And then just asking yourself, what feels good emotionally? What feels good mentally? What feels good physically? How can you meet your own needs? And then what gets in the way of you meeting your own needs? What are some of the barriers that you're noticing when you try to show up for yourself that get in the way? So when it comes to emotional well-being, it's important to focus on what is in your control. A lot of the times we worry about things that are not in our control, but it's important to focus on what is in your control. What are you able to take care of? What is something that you're able to do or to fix the situation or to make it feel better to you? What is in your control? And this is a great place where tawakkul comes in, doing what you're able to do and then relying on Allah for the rest. And it's really important to take it day by day. When we try to focus long term, sometimes that gets a lot overwhelming. So just take it day by day. And then getting and providing support. So sometimes it's easier, like I said, for us to provide that support than to get that support. But you've got to let the people in your life show up for you, just as you show up for them. That's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. I know I do. So allowing people to show up for you and support you just as you do for them. Practicing that self-compassion that we talked about. Finding joy, finding ways to insert joy in your day-to-day. It can be something small, just something that brings you joy. I know my first cup of coffee brings me so much joy. And that's something that I do daily. So just finding something small that just brings you joy, and then just allow yourself to just be in that moment and enjoy that. Keeping your routine in times of stress, it's good to keep yourself on a routine. This does not mean keep yourself on a routine that keeps you like super busy, burnt out, overworked. Take a routine that incorporates the things that we talked about. So moments of calm, moments to just pause. Keep a routine that feels good for you, that allows you to get the things that you need to get done, because I know there are things that you need to work on, but also incorporates those breaks, those moments of joy, those moments of pause. Eating and sleeping well. You've got to nourish your body. Your emotional well-being is going to take a hit if you're not taking care of your body. There's that mind-body connection. So make sure that you're eating things that are nourishing to you, that you're getting enough sleep, and that you're also moving your body in some capacity. There's not like a strict like workout regimen or anything like that, but just move your body in a way that feels good to you. Eat things that make you feel well, and make sure that you get enough sleep. Being mindful of your thoughts and self-talk. It's important to just check in, reflect. Are your thoughts more negative? Are you critical when you talk about yourself? Are you more negative in your self-talk? Because that's going to impact how you feel. So making sure that you're taking time to check in on your thoughts, and how you sort of perceive and think about yourself. Taking time to deep breathe. So taking some deep cleansing breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, to just help regulate and calm yourself down. If you're finding that you're super worked up, just taking a pause and doing some deep breaths will help sort of slow things down. And then have a sleep routine. It's important to get good sleep, like I said, and the behaviors that you engage in during the day impact your sleep at night. So it's important when it's around the time that you want to sleep to just sort of slow things down, do things that are calming, things that sort of bring the system down so that you're able to sleep better. Don't try to avoid screen time. And if you're in your bed for a while and you notice that you're just sort of tossing, turning, you're not falling asleep, maybe leave the bed for a little bit and then come back, because you really want the bed to be a place of sleep. And if you are not being able to sleep, then just maybe taking a break from it and then trying to go back on it. But it's really important that you are doing something calming as you sort of take your steps into sleep. So I said we were going to talk about self-care, and I think before we get into it, it's important to sort of identify what is self-care and what is self-soothing, because I feel like the two sort of get mixed up. So self-soothing is a way to sort of cope with the stressful moment. It's a temporary way. You just want to feel good in the moment. So when you're self-soothing, you're essentially just comforting yourself when things are difficult. However, self-care is more focused on the long term versus the present moment. So when you practice self-care, you're giving yourself an opportunity to sort of find meaning and to grow. So like if something difficult's going on and I want to self-soothe, I might take a bath. I might watch something funny on Netflix. Maybe I'll eat something that was like a comfort meal to me. So like I'm just finding ways to deal with it in that moment. It's not helping to solve the problem. It's not fixing what's going on. I'm trying to feel better in that moment. Whereas self-care is more focused on the long term. So some examples of self-soothing, maybe watching your favorite show, taking a bubble bath, enjoying your favorite drink. I put coffee. I assume everyone drinks coffee. I know they don't. Maybe tea is your thing. Enjoying a nice cup of tea, enjoying a nice maybe juice. So whatever, it's something that you enjoy. Getting a massage, maybe dancing, like something that feels good to you in that moment. Whereas self-care is more, again, that long term. So going to therapy, nourishing your body, setting those boundaries, honoring your needs, showing up for yourself, journaling. These are things that as you work on, they have those long-term effects. They may not feel good in the moment, but long-term, it helps you. So what gets in the way of self-care? The culture that we live in. So a lot of us come from cultures where self-sacrificing is more promoted, giving to others, showing up for others, that it's not really, it's sort of frowned upon to just prioritize yourself. The society that we live in and the beliefs that it has about productivity and how you're supposed to work, the society that we live in and its beliefs about rest. Those of us who maybe struggle with being a perfectionist, and that gets in the way of self-care. That lack of awareness, we don't even know that we need to engage in self-care. Feeling stressed and exhausted is sort of normalized. Pulling all-nighters is seen as like a badge of honor. So that normalizing of exhaustion is pretty common. And then just not knowing how to practice self-care, not knowing what it is. We hear this term, it's talked about in a bunch of different ways. We don't know which way to practice it. So those are just some of the barriers that get in the way. So when it comes to self-care, again, like I said, it's about that long term, and it's essentially offering yourself the care that you need. But it's important to remember that it doesn't always feel good. It can be hard, it can be difficult, you might cry. It's not really shiny or pretty as they advertise it to be. But it's things that long term, as you continue doing it, they do support you, they are good for you. So self-care can look like paying your bills. It can look like doing the laundry that you were avoiding. It can look like having a difficult conversation with someone that you love. It can look like going to therapy and unpacking things that maybe you were carrying for a while. And that time, again, it's not going to feel great, but ultimately it's going to make you feel better in the long run. So some of the domains of self-care, as you think about it, physical self-care, emotional self-care, financial self-care, spiritual self-care, and then relational self-care. So physical self-care in terms of your body, emotional self-care in terms of your emotions, financial self-care, again, finances, budgeting, spiritual self-care and the practices that you engage in, and then relational self-care in terms of the relationships that you have with other people in your life. So some of the takeaways that I want you to take away from this workshop. I know I've been talking a lot at you and I threw a lot at you, and I just hope at least one thing just resonates with you and you go with that. Is to start small and be consistent. A lot of the times we try to change everything at once, or we try to change a lot of things at once, and then we get overwhelmed and then we just sort of feel defeated. So if you start small, it's going to be easier for you to be consistent. So just choose one thing, try to implement it. Once you find yourself being consistent with it, incorporate something else, and so on and so forth. Practicing self-compassion, I can't stress this enough. It's so good for you to be compassionate to yourself, compassionate in how you feel and how you're handling things, taking time to show up for you in whatever way that you need. Remind yourself of your own humanness. You are a human. You are not perfect. You are not a robot. You're not a machine. You're human and you were created to be imperfect. So remind yourself of your humanness, and then be compassionate as you make mistakes and you stumble through life. It's okay. Do something that brings you joy. It's important to do that. It's important to put a smile on your face. And if you can do that for yourself, that's fantastic. And finally, check in often. We have to build that awareness. So taking the time to check in is important. And then just reflect what's working for you, what's not working, where do you want to make a change? But we can't reflect on that if we're not taking the time to check in with ourselves. So it's important to do that. And that is my presentation. I hope that was helpful or beneficial in some capacity to all of you, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sister Arun. This was like really, really an amazing and well built presentation. I'm like so excited to see the fresh me after this. And I feel like you really touch on so many things that we all struggling in our daily basis and like finding ways to balance. And I feel bad for people who didn't show up today. I know you're gonna watch this video, but being in person is really great and asking those questions and interacting. So for people here, if you have any question, please feel free to ask your question. Just unmute yourself. Any questions?
I'll go ahead and ask something, Zainab. Sister One, thank you so much for doing this presentation. I keep going back to the one statement that you said around, like, try to be more concerned about like what you can control versus what you can't. And I think the what you can't control is always like how people react and how that makes you feel. So that's, I think, the hardest part of like setting my boundaries is that when I set them, somebody gets upset. And so I don't know, just advice around how to almost not care about other people's feelings and reactions, which sounds really mean.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that struggle there. And I think in that moment, it's important to see by setting that boundary, they're upset, but you are not upset. And I think it's important to remember that, because by prioritizing them and how they feel, then you're on the back burner again. So understanding that you're not doing this to hurt them, but you're doing it in a way that you can show up better, and in a way that feels good to you. And they may be upset about it, but you know it's not causing them harm. You know you're not intentionally being hurtful. You're just prioritizing what you need. And I think it's important to remember that, and to not internalize or take responsibility for how they're feeling in that moment, because you know the place that you're coming from when you're setting this boundary. And it's hard. It's going to take practice.
I know Sarah had the question here. Do you want to ask your question, Sarah?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the differentiation between self-care and self-soothing. That is something I've never heard before, but I find it really helpful because, they're both useful in their contexts. And I think often when we think about self-care, we're really thinking about self-soothing, but we have to be looking toward the long-term needs as well. So just really appreciated that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad that you found that helpful. And I think a lot of the time self-care is marketed as self-soothe, and it's not to discount self-soothe. Like it has its place and it is helpful. But again, when we're focused on the long term, we want to engage more in that self-care.
I have a question, if nobody has a question. So I know you talked about like the panic and like blacking out and all this thing. So, and I think a lot of students in this time, people going to schools, are facing that. So how can we control exam panicking? So like, when you go to like taking your exam, your material, but you just panic at that moment and you lose everything.
Yeah. I think in those moments, it's just like, again, taking some time to just sort of calm yourself down, because otherwise when we are panicking, we let our thoughts sort of take control, and then we get more stressed and we're not able to focus on the exam or the fact that we know this material. So just taking time to, again, do those deep breaths, because that helps calm your body down. So like it helps decrease like your heart rate, which your heart might be working fast, and it just allows you to think a little bit better. And then remind yourself that you did everything that you could to practice for this exam. You know this material, and to trust in yourself and just allow yourself to focus. And your mind may start to shift and like think about like things that you're worried about, but just bring it back. Like, nope, I know this. I did what I could, and I'm going to take this test and I'm going to focus on what I need to. And when it comes to school in general, I would advise students to just, when they're finding themselves feeling stressed or overwhelmed, to like reach out to your professor, like ask for extensions if you can. I know sometimes students feel like they have to sort of push through, but in these times especially, I would recommend just like seeking support from your professors. And a lot of the times they're understanding and in granting you those extensions, so that you maybe feel a little less stressed, because now you have more time to tackle.
Thank you very much. Any last question? Otherwise, like, please either do the virtual round of applause. Thank you very much, Sister Rowan, for this amazing presentation and amazing lecture. For people who are here, before you go, we will do this is small tool to make sure that people could give us feedback on the event and how can we do things better. So I am launching it now. So it doesn't take more than 1 minute. Please do it. Okay, one person did it. Yay. Okay. We need one more. Okay, and now I'm gonna enter survey. Thank you very much. I'm gonna end with dua, and inshallah after that, if anyone had other questions. But before we end it with dua, if you could open your video, would be great. We're gonna take a group picture, screenshot picture. I don't have a real camera, so and no pressure if you can't. So I'm gonna count to 3. 1, 2, 3.
So I'm so sorry. I'm running from the car today, so I
here.
apologize.
No, that's okay. Let's do another one. Miriam joined. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. And now I'm gonna end with dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a healing moment for all of us, a moment that we connect with our faith, connect with our religion, to find ways to de-stress, to find ways to heal and reflect on all those things that we are going through. And may Allah bless us in our days, in our years, bless us in our food, in our family, bless us in all the steps that we're taking in our journey, in the worshiping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may all our stress goes away. And end it with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-Asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakumullah khair, everyone, for being here, and this has been really great event. We are really excited to hopefully have Sisterhood in person next time that we have these kind of workshops instead of the Zoom, since we have some of the regulation now. And now we're gonna end the recording and let people feel more comfortable.